thousands of miles an hour while it's trailing this B-52. So when we interviewed these guys, we were able to round up all the crew members one after another. We found out who they were, and we were able to talk to them afterwards. And asked one guy. He says, "Why are you guys? This was classified at one time. Why are you guys talking about it now?" And he says, "Because we won the Cold War, and we can say something about it now." So they really feel they had a part in the fall of the Soviet Union and everything. So, they didn't take the information to their graves like a lot of people have.
That's right.
And that this young guy, that at the time he was young, it's about 1957. He came upon these people at the side of the road, which were watching this UFO in this field, and was really close to him, and his car was affected by it. And all these other people, that's the reason they were there. They couldn't drive away because their cars were stopped. So he watched this, and he made notes, and he went to his boss. And, the boss took the information, but never reported it to any of his superiors. This one professor at the University of Arizona just happened to be interested in it, and he got wind of this case. And he went to talk to the man's superiors and said, "How come you didn't report this up? This is scientifically important. Why did you suppress this?" And they said, "Well, our reputations. So we don't want to be involved with it all." They were going to carry it to the grave, but this guy did it. Now, one of the guys I worked for, he was out on what was called the Line Island experiment. What they did is they had weather teams go out to Christmas Island and some of the other islands out there, and one of the early weather sites, they had it over the islands there, and it was like a test and a calibration and everything. They were taking weather readings on the ground and then the weather satellite, seeing how well this information could be used together. Well, Christmas Island doesn't have any. There's just very few visitors by air there, and like I say, my old boss there, he was out there taking a weather observation, and he's seeing these lights, and he plays his flashlight towards them, and the lights start dancing around and come towards him, and he says, "Oh, it's just the Coast Guard pilot that brought us out here fooling around." And he looked down in the cove there, and the plane was on sitting in the water there, and so when he reported that, most of the scientists said, "Okay, well, that's great, and don't say another thing about it." There's another fellow that had a similar experience at one of the other places just before that. Once again, Dr. McDonald got wind of that. One of the scientists that was involved told him, "Hey, we had a UFO sighting out there on Christmas Island." He said, "I doubt that anything survives." Well, McDonald, he just went ahead and looked. He got the weather forms from out there, and sure enough, my colleague there had gone ahead and recorded it on the weather form, the Wayband 12. He just recorded what had happened, and so the material survived. But yeah, nobody was wanting to stick their neck out.
Yep, that's why I came forward, is to take a little bit of the brunt, and then make it a lot easier for other people to come forward with the information they have. They need to do that, because if you die, it goes with you, unfortunately. So let's make it public.
Right.
Barry and Jan, can I ask you a question about Tucson and 63 files? Because as far as I know, a couple of the gentlemen that helped us back in the day with events was, somebody fell off. Okay. I need to ask you, do you have anything on the 15 copies that were issued in Europe over in Brussels of the tornado area or shape that Bob Brown talked about?
Bob Dean? Maybe it's Bob Dean.
Excuse me. I'm getting people mixed up. I was punching a button. I was trying to multitask. Hold on just a second. Ken, are you back on? Ken?
Yes, I punched the wrong button again. Give me my spacecraft and airplanes back, and I'll do a better job than these modern cell phones. They cause me problems.
I know, and you call yourself a pilot or an AI pilot, right? We got a lot
whatever
of
you want to call me. Just call me in time for dinner. I'll be good.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, Ken's over in Albuquerque. Yeah, I'm talking about his district. Bob Dean has passed from Tucson. I picked up another gentleman in that area, Augie Nost, he's been on a television show for spiritual science, but with Michio Kaku, and I work with a lot of scientists and people in neurology, phenomenologists, and also quantum physics and theoretical physicists. But one of the programs that got involved with some of our veterans, and I was not around. I've never been to a UFO event. I've only spoke as authors events like Mid-South Con in Memphis, and then local here events. But no UFO, just so you guys know, that's why I'm not considered a ufologist or entertainer, I guess one might say, that does those. But what I'm saying, I love those for entertainment education. They're great. But I know Bob Dean got one started with a gentleman in Tucson, and I was wondering if you guys can do any oral history, because Bob Dean passed, but he gave one of our ACO associates at one of those UFO congresses $500 to start the Stargate to the Cosmos. She gave it back because he got ill, and at that time the contract was at the same location as the International UFO Congress. So they had a conflict of interest on contract. But that was okay. He understood. But we took us 7 years to get that done with Ken. So Ken and Janet had it in Albuquerque. But do you know anything about him or the 15 files? Because I've got the 1.5 inch thick, and I know my husband and I worked over in Europe, and I worked in a vault. So, Barry, if you and Jan are both military or post office, when we're in those vaults, you can't bring anything out at all. But I understood that Bob got a copy, which I used to do. So his story is familiar to me. And my husband did the same thing. A lot of us worked in intelligence, and we worked in the vaults. Those aren't where you can get them outside of the vault, and you're just not going to get them. But did you guys figure out a way to get something out of where we put in the Pentagon way deep? Because we do that. You can't even get a clearance to get down there. But have you guys gotten any kind of clearance like that in the vaults?
I when I was in the military, I didn't see anything about UFOs. My job was intelligence and security for a while. No, I didn't see anything about UFOs. The stuff we found is going to the archives and finding things. And a lot of it's, hide in plain sight. It's there. And like I said, turning pages. Turn over the pages.
So it
and
has
a lot
to
of
not
this
be
stuff has been declassified, but nobody's made a big deal about it, so it's there. And FOIA is one thing, but going to the actual archives and looking through there, that's another thing.
Unfortunately,
date maybe, or can you guys help us? Or who decides in the NATO level, or the joint, or the
now you're talking about something that he called the assessment, right?
Well,
he said he had a he said he worked at NATO headquarters, and he while he was on duty, he got to read that thing. Well, I'll tell you what.
His boss
the head of the British military
didn't know about it.
Lord Hill Norton tried to track that document down.
Oh yeah,
and his assessment was it did not exist. That it was a good story, but it didn't exist.
I would have to disagree with that because of the way I work.
He and Timothy Good, who's what I say is Tim is the believer's believer. They went way beyond where anybody had to go to find out if it existed. And like I said,
these copies were very, very careful. Like me and my husband did that. We were under orders, what they call hip pocket orders. It's not made known. And if the people that I've been able to research thus far were real, but when I worked in intelligence in Europe, we call it the European theater, the kind of work we did, we weren't in uniform. We got signed temporary active. But when I worked in a vault, that's different. And that was strictly on classified documents. And they're kept completely separate from anybody that's walking around in a uniform. But my husband and I both had that kind of job. It's very in deep. And sometimes if you were really that bored, because it's a very boring job sitting in a vault, and my husband too, but when he came later, they could actually do some hacking into the other government computers for fun. And U.S. Army S1 or S2. Did you work S2, Jan?
I worked in nuclear, and
you had nukes. That's what
and I was also an intelligence sergeant. As far as I'm concerned, it's what's in the vaults. To me, it's like Vegas. It stays in Vegas, and that's what everybody I outbriefed. It didn't matter if they had a clearance or not, because they had, just by being in the unit, they had classified information, even if they didn't know it. I told them, I said, hey, when you leave Germany here, you could talk about how the women are and all the places you went to and the food you ate, but everything else, forget about it. Just tell your friends you don't remember what it was like. That's what I used to say.
Well, yeah, that was debriefing. I got to do that too. So that was beyond the 50s and 60s. But folks, back in the day, it was pretty tight. That was in Livingston, and that was the Supreme Headquarters. But that was in Paris, and they moved it over to Brussels. But that was over a French altercation we had. Somebody felt like he lost faith over there in France, you know. But, a lot of people know that there's a lot of top secret, and they just don't have access. The men in the uniforms usually don't. And then you have the cryptos, and then you have the people like Jan here, and the Navy guy here, Thomas Becker, that worked on a Navy ship. And they did have nuclear. And nuclear is a whole different group of people, and they still have them today. And there's no telling how many different code names they have, because you have to be compartmentalized. Jan, tell them about compartmentalized, what you're finding, because you said you can only do a Freedom of Information Act only. that you guys have, but that's a lot.
No, the